First, I would like to introduce to you my co-presenter, Tracy. A big thank you to Tracy Murphy for stepping in on last minute notice as Magella has been called away on family business. Magella was going to do that together with me today. Tracy, can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yes, and I managed to remember to take the mute off, which is about a first. So I'm a casual practice nurse. I've also worked in immunisation in a local council, and I'm just looking at where people are from here. And I worked at Ballarat Council, so there's quite a few sort of local people there. I think Ballan and Ararat. I also coordinate the Nurse Immuniser program at the University of Melbourne, which is a fully online course which is recognised by HESA. So some of you may have hopefully recently completed that course. So I have been working giving COVID vaccines in the clinic since I think we started around May. We were the last tranche to start. So I've been giving the AstraZeneca and the Pfizer, but I've managed to get out of doing the children's vaccines, which I'm very pleased about because that sounds like it's very noisy. So I'll hand back to Ingrid.
Thanks, Tracy. I also want to introduce my fellow practice facilitators, and I'm one of them. I forgot totally to say I'm Ingrid, and some of you may know me, others probably don't. I'm also a nurse, but I'm working now in practice facilitation for the PHN. And we're also joined by many others of the practice facilitator teams and others from the PHN. I want to mention particular Jasmine, who will keep an eye on the chat part, and Steph, who will monitor who has their hands up and call out your name to talk when you put your hand up. So please put yourself on camera, Jasmine and Steph.
All right, hello everyone.
Right. So I would like to begin now first with acknowledging the traditional owners and custodians of the lands and waterways from which we're all zooming in from today. We recognise their diversity and resilience and the ongoing place that First Nation peoples hold in our communities. We pay our respects to the elders, both past and present, and I wish to extend that respect to any First Nations people connecting in today. We commit to working together in the spirit of mutual understanding, respect and reconciliation. And we support self-determination for First Nations peoples and organisations, and will work together on closing the gap. Hi everyone, and welcome to our first practice nurse meeting for this year. This is our agenda, and it's a pretty big one, and we really thought hard on how to make this huge topic interactive on a virtual platform. Hopefully, maybe in the future, we can do these face-to-face again, but at the moment, this is all we have, and so we make the best of it. So we count on you to brainstorm with us and provide examples. Tell us about the issues you have encountered in your practice and which solutions you may have found. As I said before, for that, I encourage you to make use of the chat and to raise your hand if you would like to speak. I hope all of you have microphone access and maybe even camera access. If you have access to camera, please put yourself on camera and don't hesitate or don't be shy in coming forward. With this said, let's jump right into the topic of cold chain management. Cold chain management, what can go wrong? I'm sure you can think of a lot of things that can and maybe have gone wrong with the cold chain management at your practice. Last year in December, the immunisation unit at the Department of Health received a significant number of cold chain breach reports. You may have been contacted by the department with an email saying, you know, what they had received. Now, this is where we want you to help us. My first question to you is, why do you think this happened? Can you put in the chat a few ideas what you think has happened in December or even November last year? What reasons were there for these reports? Put your hand up if you have an idea. Why do you think that a lot of these reports, particularly in December, have come to the department? So we still are getting joined by people coming in a little bit late, but don't be shy in saying you can't go wrong. I'm sure you know why there would have been cold chain breaches. What would have gone wrong in practices? Power outage. Yes, Melissa, due to weather. Excellent. Exactly. Power outage, definitely. And also due to weather, because yes, we definitely didn't have very nice weather, lots of storm at the time, thunderstorms. And obviously the immunisation unit at the department is not just in Victoria, it's also so the whole nation, whole of Australia. And so we had bad weather, we had bushfires in Perth in Western Australia. What else? Okay, so mainly the power outages, floods. Yes, that's right, Jenny. Yeah, we got more. Can I see more? I can't see all of them. My screen is a bit limited.
Accidental unplugging.
Yes, accidental unplugging. Yeah. People not knowing that that was a fridge that contained vaccines and that pulled out the plug. Yep.
And that's it for now, Ingrid.
Okay, so the department, of course, identified 4 main issues. And they did say very clearly, some have been in response to major weather events, like you already identified, resulting in significant power outages at the time. And while these events have been reported and actioned by the immunisation providers, they go on saying further, it appears that there might be a broader lack of cold chain management knowledge and requirements. The key issues they identified were untrained staff. For example, when new or current staff being responsible for cold chain management without the provision of adequate cold chain management training. So new staff started and they didn't get trained properly. Inadequate protocols and procedures, for example, staff not being familiar with knowing how to implement a correct backup plan during a power outage. Vaccines being discarded prior to receiving advice from the immunisation unit. Again, not enough training probably. Incorrect use of vaccine storage equipment. For example, the failure to correctly reset minimum maximum temperature displays, data loggers not set to read at 5-minute intervals, data loggers not routinely downloaded weekly, or more frequently if a temperature excursion is identified. So this is all right from the report I'm reading here. Inadequate vaccine storage equipment. For example, the use of bar or domestic fridges instead of the required purpose-built vaccine fridge, or a vaccine fridge not being serviced annually. The data loggers were not working, or the data logger batteries were not replaced in a timely manner. So hopefully we'll try to address some of these issues today. So Tracy, I'll pass that on to you now to talk about the prevention of cold chain breaches. Tell me when you're ready for me.
Okay, I'm good. Yes, okay. So all those things that Ingrid mentioned really could be solved with these 3 things that are on the slide: having a plan, education, and practice. But I want to say before we go any further that practice nurses are actually great at cold chain. And there was some research done in 2009 which actually found that in practices that had a practice nurse, 98% of those practices maintained the vaccine cold chain without any incidents, as opposed to 42% who didn't. So I'm not sure why all these things have happened recently, but I think a lot of it is probably out of the nurse's control. So things like weather and floods. You can do some planning for that, but if the whole area is flooded and you can't get into your clinic, well, there's really not much you can do about that. What I did want to mention first is that where we'll get all our information from is from the National Vaccine Storage Guidelines, STRIVE 5. We are using the 3rd edition now. If you've got any of the older ones, the ones with the orange cover, they're now out of date and you should throw them away, and you can just order one of these new ones or you can download it online. So next slide, Ingrid. The main changes to the latest edition of the STRIVE 5 were that domestic fridges are no longer allowed to be used. Previously, we were able to make some changes to domestic fridges by putting bottles of salt water in the door and only using the middle part of the fridge, but they're out now. And you must have a data logger in every fridge that you're using to store vaccines. In the past, we just got the data logger from, I think it was the Division of General Practice or the Medicare Local, and we would put it in for a week before we did accreditation. They would download and show us, send the reading to us, which came on a long piece of tape. We've now got one of these Clever loggers. The Clever logger is wireless, so the square thing in front is like a modem that sits outside the fridge. The little square thing behind, one sits in each fridge, and it sends the data to the computer. There's a continuous readout there of your fridge temperature. You can go in and have a look at that data. You do get emails and SMSs to your phone if it goes out of range. The other data logger shown there, this is one you have to actually take out of the fridge and plug into your computer and download your data, and you should do that weekly or after you've had a breach. If you have a power cut, though, remember your Clever logger is not going to work without your electricity. You're not getting anything to your computer. It will keep that data, but it'll only download it once your power's restored. So you also need a battery backup thermometer. Now, I think all vaccine fridges now do have a battery backup thermometer that's built in, but if for some reason yours doesn't, then one that's shown here, which you can just stick on the outside of your fridge and put the probe inside the fridge. There's no point having the thermometer inside the fridge because then you've got to open the door to check the temperature. The wire is quite thin and it will fit through the door usually to sit on the outside of the fridge. So could have the next slide, please, Ingrid. So I don't plan on doing too much work today on my day off. So I'm going to ask you now to think about how nurses can prevent cold chain breaches. Just put whatever you can think of into the chat, or if you want to speak, you can unmute your microphone and just say the things that you do or that you plan to do to prevent cold chain breaches.
Emily Craig did put in the chat before not closing the fridge door properly.
Yeah, and I have to admit that I did that not so long ago. We had a basket at the bottom of the fridge that had Prolia in. I'd pulled it out. I had pushed the basket back in, but the Prolia box was sticking up, and although I'd pushed the door closed, the box bounced it back, and that fridge very quickly heated up. The alarm was going off. But everyone was busy, nobody went back, and it was about 10 minutes before we noticed it. And then we shut the door and kept it locked until the temperature returned, and it just seemed to take forever to go back to normal. And we went and looked at the data logger, and we'd just gone out of the 15 minutes. So we had to mark all the boxes with an X. And of course, whenever it happens, there are lots of vaccines in there, so it took for ages to do that. So it was a silly mistake, and I won't do it again. I'll make sure I shove that box right back in.
All right, we've got a few more things in the chat. So I've got education and updates. Do frequent temperature checks and alarm checks. Make immunisation providers to reset the temperature every time they open the vaccine fridge. Locate the vaccine first before opening the fridge. Someone said, sounds silly, but check fridges are shut after doctors enter the fridge room.
That doesn't sound silly at all.
Yep. Ensure all staff are educated and trained. Educate other staff. It's easy access protocols. Regular check of fridge door, power supply, temp, and keeping fridge clean. And it looks like the chat started to slow down from there.
Okay. So what we need to have is plans and protocols. Did somebody? Yes, someone said easy access protocols. Yeah, where are the protocols? You might know where they are, but if you've got a casual nurse who's just come in for the day, does she know where to find the protocols? Is there someone other than one nurse that actually knows this stuff? Does the practice manager know at least where the protocols are? Do other staff know how to check the temperature? I mean, that's something that anyone can do, check the temperature and reset the fridge in the morning. So it's about making sure you're communicating to everyone. And it's often those people who are not the clinical staff that will be the cause of your breach. For example, the pharmacy comes, they drop off a packet in a plain paper bag. Reception staff put it in your treatment room or your stock room. They don't tell you that they've received a parcel. You go in half an hour later because you've been busy and you find there's actually a vaccine in that packet. So it's about educating your staff what to do with parcels. We've got a box in our fridge that is just for drop-offs, pharmacy drop-offs. They stick anything in there and then we will go in when we see there's something in there and put it in the right place. That was because we've actually reduced our staff recently. Previously, there was always someone in that room and there isn't now, and people were just leaving stuff in there thinking that the nurse would sort it out sooner or later. So we had to come up with a plan to fix that. So you need to think about who needs education and what sort of education they need. And you as practice nurses are the ideal people to do that education with the other staff. Checking the temp twice a day, it's just routine to check your temp of your fridge twice a day, in the morning and before you leave, and put it on your chart. But if you find that you don't remember, use some kind of alarm, either something stuck on your door where you leave and where you enter, to remind you to do the temperature check. When you're getting something out of your fridge, just very quickly note what the temperature is. You don't need to write it down. You just need to note what the temperature is before you remove a vaccine. Don't overstock your fridge, which is going to be very difficult soon when it's flu season and you've got COVID vaccines as well. If you're lucky enough to have 2 fridges, then you can split your vaccines up. But if you've only got 1 fridge, you will have to try to make sure you don't order too much stock, because then it all gets pushed together. The vaccine boxes get pushed up against the back plate and they can freeze, and you've not got air circulating around the vaccines, that cold air circulating, and make sure everything's at the same temperature. Don't store stuff around and on top of your fridge. So you need to get the air, needs to circulate around your fridge. So if there is a gap at the side, don't use that to shove all kinds of things in it, and cover the top of the fridge with lots of different things. Make sure you do have a supply of batteries for your minimum and maximum thermometers. They're not the easiest batteries. They're not usually AAs or AAAs, but they're those flat ones. So make sure you've got enough in case your battery does go out. And I would suggest that you change it. I mean, you're supposed to change it once a year according to the guidelines, but I would suggest that perhaps do it twice a year, like you do your fire alarms. There's a picture that's come up on the screen there. I'm sure that you've all got the do not turn off the power or disconnect the refrigerator by your plug, but have you also got one in your power box? And that probably doesn't matter if you've got a small surgery where everybody would know if someone was going to do something. But if your surgery is in a bigger building, someone else might have called an electrician in and they might accidentally turn your circuit off. So you need to know which fuse is for your fridge and make sure that's marked, and make sure that anyone that goes to do something in that power box comes to see you and they don't turn your power off from the main box. You need to react to the fridge alarm if it goes off, so you do need to know what that alarm sounds like, and so does everybody else. Like the other day when ours went off, people must have heard it, but they just didn't do anything about the alarm. As you said, make sure you close the door and reduce the amount of time the door is open. So the picture that's come up here, this is a fridge map. Can't see it very clearly. This is from our fridge, but it tells you which shelf each vaccine's on so that you can look at that first, especially if you're not familiar with the fridge, and you can go in and you can grab your vaccine. We've got the next picture there. Oh, okay. In our fridge, the vaccines are in baskets and they've got, you can see their 12-month immunisations, and the one below, I think, has got 2 to 6 month immunisation. So you can just grab one of those baskets out, then you can get the vaccines, put the basket back in and keep the fridge door open for the smallest amount of time, rather than standing there at the fridge with the fridge door open, trying to root through the basket and find the vaccines that you want. So those are just some of the things. Did anybody else have anything else they wanted to add to that? Any great ideas you've had for looking after your vaccines? Does everybody use baskets? No, nobody's talking.
Tracy, sorry, it's Kim Hutton here. Now, I am not a nurse, but I have dealt with fridges and things that need to be stored in fridges, such as vaccines. So we often use the baskets like you've got, but we also had on the outside of the fridge what each shelf had. So, you know, you might want to have COVID vaccines and then flu vaccines, and then when you open it, you at least then only have to go through Novavax, Moderna, Pfizer, grab that basket, as opposed to working out which shelf it's on and going through, especially if you've got a big fridge with lots of baskets in it.
Yeah, and I guess the other thing is this is a clear glass door. Some fridges don't have clear glass, so you can't even look before you go in. You do need to have a map on the outside so that you know where stuff is.
Yep. A few in the chat have said that yes, they do keep everything in baskets, but also labelling in terms of age group. So I guess with Pfizer at the moment. Yeah. And yeah, just a lot of labelling going on the baskets.
Yeah, it makes it a lot easier. Yeah, and someone's got a chart where they've got the expiry dates on, which is important that you do stock rotation when you get your vaccine delivery, that the new stock goes at the back of your basket and that you use the old stock up first. And it does take time. You know, you're allowed to have your temperature go up for 15 minutes while you're restocking the fridge. That happens quite quickly. So you want to be able to do that in the most efficient way you can. So certainly having a chart with your vaccine expiry dates is good.
Tracy, do you want to move on to the flu season?
Yes, we'll move to the next slide. So there have been some extra challenges, and there will be with the, the coming flu season, in that your fridge can be constantly open with everyone wanting to go in and grab flu vaccines. So we have clinics for flu vaccines, but the doctors will also opportunistically go in there and get flu or COVID vaccines. And you also need to order large amounts of flu vaccine, because although it would be nice only to be able to order 100, you know that you might not get your next lot of vaccines. So everyone tends to order the largest amount they can, which is a problem if you have a cold chain breach, that you're going to have a lot of vaccines that will be affected. What we've done to try and reduce the amount of times that the fridge is open, the COVID vaccines are drawn up and they're put in this black container, which is marked Pfizer only, that particular one. Inside it, there are 2 trays that are enough for 6 each of the vaccines. And so that when the doctors go, they can just open it, they take the lid off. It's an easy to take off lid, grab a vaccine, put the lid back on and go to their room, hopefully with the least amount of time that fridge is open. We as nurses take enough for an hour to the room to do the clinic, because it will last for an hour at room temperature, and we just have it in a box to keep the light off it. You do have to keep an eye on the time you've taken it out and make sure that if it's getting close to the hour, you have to go and put it back in the fridge. Those little esky coolers, although it's tempting to put an ice pack in one of those and put them in your room, they do get really cold, the little ones, and they quickly get out of range. You certainly need to have a thermometer, so I prefer just to keep those ones at room temperature. If you want to give the doctor some flu vaccine to keep in their room, then you would need to make sure that you monitor that they are being kept at the right temperature with a temperature probe into your esky. And I would have a practice first, if you're going to do that, by packing the esky and putting an empty box in with the temperature probe, and just seeing how cold it gets and how long it keeps its temperature. Next slide.
Sorry, Tracy, I've just got one question in the chat. Can you separate your vaccine stock half and half into separate fridges in case one fridge does have a malfunction, or would that create too much confusion?
I don't think it would cause confusion. We've got one fridge that's got flu vaccines in, but we do bring a few flu vaccines into the other fridge because that's closer. So long as you're checking your dates. And certainly it's great to have 2 fridges. If you do have one breaks down, then you can use the other. So why do we go to all this trouble? And with vaccines, they're free, they're provided by the NIPS. Does it matter if they get damaged? We throw them away, we get more stock. Then the main problem is that if you go into work one day and you're really busy and you don't check your fridge, and it gets to lunchtime and you haven't checked your emails, and you find that there has been a breach and those vaccines have been out of range, you may also find that several people have already been in and had vaccines that day. And you will need to ring the Department of Health to find out what you need to do about that. And you may need to revaccinate them. And although we know that giving a vaccine that's got a bit hot and giving another vaccine isn't going to do people any harm, that is not how patients will perceive it. Especially if you've got a first-time mum with a new baby who's now being told she needs to bring the baby back because there was something wrong with the vaccine. Not only will your reputation, because you can guarantee if it was the nurse that will give it, everyone will know that the nurse did something wrong. The clinic's reputation, and you also destroy their confidence in the vaccine program. And next time they go for a vaccine, they're going to be very hesitant about that. The other thing is that you may also have people who believe they're protected against a disease, but they're not. So you could have someone who's been given heated, let's just say Hep B vaccine, and think that they're protected from that disease. They to do something that exposes them to blood, they think they're going to be okay, and they're not. So it's really important to protect the vaccines, to make sure that we are giving effective vaccines to people, and that we don't need to recall anyone. Next slide. And if that's not a good enough reason, if you've got private vaccines in your fridge, then vaccines are very expensive. You can see when you look at the prices there, it pretty quickly gets into the thousands of dollars. And so if people are not too, if your practice isn't too happy about giving you some time to do your cold chain management and to educate other people, maybe just add up how much private stock you've got and what those vaccines cost, and that could be a good driver for making sure that people do want to make sure that they do the cold chain correctly. So now it's back to Ingrid.
Yes, and wow, are these vaccines expensive? Like, I did not know that a shingles vaccine is nearly $300. You know, or Q fever when you travel. That's just absolutely, wow, mind-blowing. So now you've got a problem with your power storm hit and maybe something else. I'm sure there are many different reasons for power failure, even if someone has just taken out the plug of the power. Maybe you were told beforehand by the power company and you could plan for it, but maybe it was just a sudden storm. Whatever it was, you're without power. So now we want to know, what do you do? Please help us. What do you do in your practice? And this may be different for each of you, because I would imagine that if you are a small little practice compared to a big practice, there are different procedures, internal procedures that you follow. Or if you are far out in a away region compared to maybe in the city, that may be different again. You may have different procedures. Your owners, your GPs are the owner, may be different to a corporate practice that have their own procedures. So please keep typing in the chat, keep putting up your hand. Without you, we can't keep going on. I give you a little bit of time. And you don't need to know everything. Doesn't have to be the whole lot, the whole list. I think we have 27 or 30 people at the moment. So each of you puts only one idea what you do in a power outage. Would be great. Myra, thank you. Yes, immediately put the note, don't open the fridge. Absolutely, yeah. Battery backup. Move the fridge to a working fridge. Good idea. If you have 2 fridges, perfect. That's a really good thing. If you have 2 fridges and you have a power failure or power outage, both of your fridges may be out though. So you would have to think, where else could you find a fridge?
I'm just wondering, how long does the battery backup last for, and how much did it cost? And if you know that, Melissa, I'd be interested.
Yeah. Hold down the S key. Yeah, move the vaccines into the S key. Especially if it takes a bit longer with the power outage. I mean, if it's only a very short outage of maybe 10 minutes or 15 or even an hour, Tracy, how long would a fridge, in your experience, last without power to maintain?
Oh, it can last so long as you can keep the door
Shut.
closed.
Yeah.
It depends on the external conditions, how warm the room is. But I'm interested in the battery backup, because I know that we had a battery backup for our computer and that would only last for 2 hours. So, you know, I'm just wondering how long these battery backups last for.
I guess it could potentially be a solar backup, solar battery backup, you know, Tesla.
6 hours, okay, on backup. Not sure of the cost. Yeah, solar power one would probably be useful, because you wouldn't want a diesel generator going, would you?
Yeah. Well, maybe some actually have a diesel generator. Any one of you have a diesel generator?
There might be one if they're farming country. One down on the farm you can go and
Yes.
bring up.
Well, I certainly would have wanted to have a diesel generator the other day last year when we had the power outage and I couldn't move my car out of the garage because the garage door was an electric garage door and I was not strong enough to open the garage manually.
So who's got enough rigid eskies to fit all their vaccine stock in?
I'd say that probably depends on the size of the practice too. And
how many vaccines you've got, like the flu season soon, so we're going to have lots and lots, you know. And where do you stock these eskies?
Yeah,
they're great big things.
We have an arrangement with a local hire company to get a generator delivered.
Okay, that's a really good idea.
Fantastic idea.
Yes.
Yeah. Very good.
That should definitely be highlighted.
And that is forward thinking. That is very much forward thinking, you know. So obviously you need a backup plan and potentially alternative storage, and whatever that alternative storage may be, like, you know, a generator that you can hire, or maybe you have an agreement with another GP practice or a nearby hospital or a nearby pharmacy. As long as they don't suffer under that power outage as well, that may be an option for you to look at. Or, you know, a backup battery. So you already mentioned pretty good ideas. You could also use a cooler. We've said that, but never, as Tracy said earlier, never ever use a normal fridge or bar fridge. That's not allowed anymore. Okay. Tamara says she has an alternative arrangement with a nearby pharmacy. Yep, great. And
the good thing with the pharmacies is they're often open 24/7 and 7 days a week.
Yep.
Whereas if you had an arrangement with your local council, they're open 9 till 5 Monday to Friday and they're not there on public holidays. So a local pharmacy would be a good option, providing they've got room in their fridge. If they've just taken a huge order.
Yeah, not so good then.
No.
There was also mentioned earlier, actually, that you have to immediately isolate the vaccines and that you need to make sure they're stored between the 2 and the 8 degrees of Celsius, that you need to leave them in the fridge with the door closed, with a sign on, power out, do not use vaccines, keep refrigerator door closed. You need to monitor these fridge temperatures pretty closely with a maximum thermometer or a portable data locker. Like Tracy said before, this should ideally be done with a standalone thermometer with an external display to limit the need to open the door. And if the temperature rises above 8 degrees, you need to move it to a prepared cooler, and we'll come to that in a minute, or a cold box or any other purpose-built vaccine refrigerator. You need to make sure that all of the vaccines are packed and monitored with a digital min-max thermometer or data locker. So if it happens outside of business hours, And clearly it depends then on the temperature monitoring and the alarm systems you use, because maybe you actually have an alert sent to the practice manager or the practice nurse by text message or email from that monitoring system. And obviously you need to refer to the appropriate policies and procedures in your practice, and you need to know where to find them in case you're unsure what to do. So that sort of brings us back what someone said earlier in the chat, you know, and you need to make sure that others know where to find these procedures and that others know what to do. And what Tracy said earlier too, that training, that information sharing to the other staff in the clinic is really important. Maintenance of cold chain of vaccines is not just a nurse's duty. This is actually an approach the whole practice needs to do, and it's also in the accreditation standard. So the fifth standard actually mentions it separately, that cold chain management is part of accreditation. So now I want to show you how to pack a cooler. Now I'm just needing to work out how to get to my little video. Can you actually hear that?
Can't hear it, Ingrid, but we can see it.
That's not good. I forgot about this one, didn't I? Any technical ideas on how to share that?
So Ingrid, unshare, and then when you share, make sure you select
Okay, yeah.
microphone.
To get over to here. And oops. Include computer sounds. Oh, good point. Thanks, Kim. As you can see. Right.
So, before packing vaccines into an esky, chill the inside of the cooler with frozen ice or gel packs for a few hours first. Your next step is to condition another set of ice or gel packs to be packed with the vaccines. This increases their temperature to within the cold chain temperature range and reduces the risk of freezing the vaccines. To condition the frozen packs, remove them from the freezer and lay them out in a single row on their sides. Leave a 5 centimetre space around each ice pack to allow maximum air exposure and reduce the conditioning time. You're waiting for the ice packs to sweat. This will take up to 1 hour at 20 degrees Celsius, longer if you're using gel packs. The pack is conditioned as soon as liquid begins to slosh about slightly inside the pack. Once the ice or gel packs are conditioned, remove the first batch of frozen packs that were used to cool the esky. Place polystyrene chips or other suitable insulating material at the bottom of the esky. This eliminates hot and cold spots. Pack your vaccines. Then place a minimum-maximum thermometer in the centre of the vaccine stock. Surround the vaccines with packing material, which allows cold air to circulate. Polystyrene chips are preferable to bubble wrap as they promote air circulation. If using bubble wrap, avoid wrapping the vaccines tightly. Place the conditioned ice or gel packs on top. If using a larger cooler, place conditioned packs around the sides of the cooler as well. Make sure vaccine stock is not in direct contact with the ice or gel packs to minimise risk of freezing. When packed, close and seal the lid of the cooler. Monitor the temperature hourly at the very least. If you're taking the esky to an outreach session, check the temp before leaving, upon arrival, prior to administering vaccine, and at least hourly throughout the immunisation session. Keep the cooler out of direct sun and only remove vaccines as they're required. If you've packed following these guidelines, the vaccines can be stored this way for up to 8 hours. At the end of an outreach session, vaccines which have been continuously stored between 2 and 8 degrees Celsius should be returned to the vaccine fridge as soon as possible.
So, just going back to my PowerPoint slide now. So can you see the right and hear me?
Yep, we can, Ingrid.
Excellent, it's working. Isn't that nice when technology works occasionally? So I don't know what you thought about that video. Is it worthwhile? Did you know all of that already? I was actually surprised that the vaccines can be stored 8 hours in there. And considering what Tracy just said before, you know, that potentially you have a vaccine storing in a fridge that's not opened for 8 hours. You're getting your ASCII ready as it comes closer maybe to the 6 hour period, if that's still in that correct temperature limit. You pack your cooler, then you may have another 8 hours. Thinking of a long-term outage, potentially a day, but at the end of the day, you're pretty close to, yeah, probably come close to what you can do for your vaccines to maintain them. So these are all the resources available through the Strive for 5. There's a lot more in that document, Strive for 5, and I can only advise you reviewing that regularly, because what you don't use, you usually forget. And I wouldn't imagine that you have a power outage every week to keep up to date. We'll send out these resources and more, also what you have suggested in the chat, and a checklist on managing a power failure, and also the vaccine storage self audit. Now the power is back on. What you do now? Let me know what you do when the power comes back on. What do you think after the power has been out for a while, however long that may be? What are one of the first steps you do?
Just being timekeeper, Ingrid, do you want to keep going and then we'll come back to the chat?
Yes, please put it in the chat and I'll keep talking. Right. Reset fridges, fantastic. Check temperature. Yep, that's great. That's exactly it. You need to record the minimum maximum temperature, reset the refrigerator temperature. Once it reaches the outside readings are between 2 and 8. So if it's outside the 2 and 8, you need to complete the cold chain breach report form, and you need to send it off. And Tracy will talk on that a little bit more. And you need to keep monitoring the refrigerator closely to ensure that the temperature is actually consistently stable. You need to know your backup plan. So what else can you do to prepare yourself for a power failure? I'll keep going through that fairly quickly while you please put in things in the chat, because all of that will go out to you and we count on you coming up with ideas. So you've already identified it's important that other staff are trained to and know what to do, where to find the equipment that's needed. You need to keep information handy for staff to look up what to do in a case of power outage, especially, you know, the ones that are new or not always there, the part-timers. You need to test your equipment regularly. You need to make sure batteries are exchanged and also keep a maintenance log. Best way to keep a cold chain management on forefront of everyone's mind is to actually include it in one of your practice management meetings, on the agenda of your practice management meetings. This way you can regularly discuss and identify the issues that may have surfaced and include everyone in finding a solution. I like the idea of more exercise for the whole clinic, but you may not find the idea to do that on a regular basis, so maybe once or twice a year if possible. Share your knowledge widely with others, make it clear that it's the whole practice involved in that cold chain vaccine storage management. It's also a good opportunity to do a quality improvement activity. We've prepared a PDSA for that, which we'll send out to you with the other resources. And Tracy will now talk about the actual cold chain breach and what to do if this has happened. So over to you, Tracy.
Okay, so despite everything you did, you've had a breach. The first thing you got to do is define what is a breach. So it's any incursion outside of the temperature range of 2 to 8. There are a couple of exceptions. One is a temp up to 12 degrees C, lasting less than 15 minutes while you're stocking the fridge, and you don't need to do anything if that occurs, unless it's been something you haven't been expecting. And in Vic, for government-supplied vaccine, for the first time, a breach of less than 25 degrees C for less than 6 hours doesn't need to be reported, but someone did put in the chat about marking the boxes with an X, because if it happens again, then you do need to report any of the vaccines that have been affected a second time. You also need to find out what the cause of the breach was and respond to that, fix it so it doesn't happen again. So if your breach is worse than that, the vaccines have been at 36 degrees over the weekend, it's a definite breach. First thing you've got to do is isolate the vaccines, lock the fridge, hide the keys so that no one can get them. Communicate to the team so they all know what's happening, and you might need to start cancelling some appointments if you had people coming in for vaccines that day. And then you need to fill out the cold chain breach report form, and that will be sent to you in your resources. If you haven't seen it, it's a huge thing to fill out. It'll take you an hour to go through all the stuff. So the best thing is to make sure that you don't have a breach, and then you won't have to fill that out. But you need to do all the information on that form before you either email it to the Department of Health or phone them. Do not throw away any vaccines until you've heard from the department. Although we keep the vaccines at 2 to 8, a lot of the vaccines are more hardy than that. And Hep B, for example, was kept at temperatures of 45 degrees for a week and was still found to be effective, and at 37 degrees for a month and was still found to be effective. So you may not necessarily have to throw your vaccines away, but you may have to shorten their expiry date, and you'll need to write the new expiry date on the package. If you've got private vaccines in your fridge, then you need to ring the manufacturer, and the cold chain breach reporting form actually has the numbers of Seqirus and GSK and Pfizer on the bottom of it, so you need to ring them, and they may give you advice that may be different for the vaccine than the advice you get from the DHS. That's fine. For the private vaccines, you follow what the manufacturer says. For the government vaccines, you follow what the Department of Health tells you to do. And then, of course, afterwards, you need to debrief, complete an incident form to hopefully prevent it happening again.
Have I caught up with the slides, Tracy?
I think so, yes. And also, if you have accidentally given any vaccines that were involved in the breach, you'll also need to make a report to SafeVic, and they will provide you with advice on whether you need to repeat that vaccine. So I think that's it. I think we've finished.
So thanks, Tracy. That was
2
really
minutes
fantastic.
to go.
Much appreciated you stepping in so, short notice and giving us your very much in practice grounded knowledge and sharing it with us. And the same goes to everyone, of course, who attended. Thanks for coming along, and I hope you found it worth your while. And as mentioned, we'll send out the slides and info to you. Before we go to our resource page, please take the time to complete the survey, which you find the link in the chat functions. It's only a couple of questions. We really would like to have some feedback, and it'll help us with planning our next meeting. And then you will also receive a certificate of attendance for your CPD points, of course. Feel free to stay behind. We're happy to stay behind. And if you have any questions, either put them into the chat, put up your hand. Feel free to talk now as much as you like. Now this is just the last slide for the resources. And but as I said, this will come out with an email to all of who attended today as well. So I'm just going to stop sharing my screen now, if I manage to get onto that right spot again. Here we go. You can see me now, I assume. Is that right?
Yes.
Yes. Great. So anybody would like to say something? Maybe any of my colleagues would like to chirp in and have a comment or say something.
That was great. I learned
Any
so
questions? Well done, everyone.
Well, I'm going to go and find out who we could borrow a generator from, because I think that was a great idea.
Yeah, I thought that was a fantastic idea.
Yeah, because we certainly don't want one, and we've got nowhere to storage, and it saves all the messing around with the eskies if you plug it in to a generator.
And maybe the generator is actually the way to go into the future anyway.
Yeah.
With
I think you can just park it outside. I think and then it will go outside, and you'll have to put the cord in through the window, the electric cord to your fridge.
Yeah. So I think that was great, and I also want to say thank you to all the nurses here that have participated, and practice managers potentially as well, because some nurses are practice managers or vice versa. So that was really good. I think we had a really good crowd that were engaging with us and helping us along. Thanks very much, everyone, for attending. You've got lots of questions. Jotted down a lot of questions, said Kim. Great. Lovely.
I'm just going to stop the recording now, Ingrid.
Okay. Yeah, that's a good idea. I forgot about that.